and or raspberries,
Right.
a little bit of millseed or flaxseed or whatever,
Mm.
and then scoop away 150 mils of milk and
150 mils of milk is nothing.
natton, and then into the air fryer,
Oh.
and
Oh, it's like
then
a muffin.
30 grams of Biscoff and Nutella on top. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
So it's pretty low fat, like 15 or 20 grams,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
less
yeah.
even, depending on the seeds you use, 30 to 40 grams of protein, depending.
It's not very dry.
Oh, it's like, no, it's unbelievable. So it's 100 grams of blueberries in there, 150
Oh,
mils of milk,
yeah.
and there's a banana in there. So it's incredibly moist.
So it's like a moist little muffin.
It's like this size. It's a full bowl, like,
Jesus Christ.
it's massive.
And you do 4 scoops of vanilla ice cream on top then.
Basically a tablespoon of Biscoff
Okay.
or Nutella, and it fill you right up. Fiber maxing to the max. It's, I think, about 15 or 20 grams of fiber, depending.
Right.
So it's pretty good for the old fibey vibey doobies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Those fiber, but you have to protein and fiber are so
Fiber is
hard.
the next up and coming thing. Did you not hear that in the fitness place?
Fiber maxing.
Fitness industry, world, internet.
But the
Do
problem,
you not see that in that place? No.
the trying to get enough fiber, are you getting your RDA and enough protein? So much work.
Well, yeah, if you're not eating vegetables.
But even still, it's a ton of vegetables to get the. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
20 or 30 grams of fiber is the RDA. Or the
Yes.
The RDA. 4 by 8 vegetables.
My breakfast at the moment is no breakfast, or else 2 slices of toast,
Mm-hmm.
or else a bowl of all bran with raisins.
That's the most. That's the tea and toast diet old people have when they start getting osteopenia.
Yeah. I'd say I'll be all right.
Here we go now. Is everyone just blasting a lot of gear at the moment? It's everyone.
Where did that come from?
Everybody's just.
Jesus Christ.
I'm feeling fucking left out, lads. Oh, my chat.
Are people in the chat already?
Is everyone on the chat a gram of gear as well? Is that it? Is everybody just blasting?
Is everybody taking way more gear than they're saying they're taking?
Morning from the US. Hello, Cameron.
Oh, got the notification. Oh my God.
Girl, put your records. But my singing's actually still got a bit of stocks on my flag.
Oh, that's so close. Remember John played a bit of like Sleeping on the Blacktop or something on guitar at the start of a podcast once, and it got flagged.
Hi lads, hope you're Andrew. Whoa. Hope you're well. Booked in my chat with the lads' parents for indoor nationals this weekend. Appreciate input and advice. Best of luck, Andrew. Let us know how it goes. Parents can be tricky, and just be ready to walk away and keep your sanity. It's the most important thing. Everything else can be worked out, but don't lose your look. Athletes are a dime a dozen. You'll find that. Stephen, okay. Details about camp in June, please. So, there was actually sorry. I just snorted into the mic. That's disgusting. I'm actually so sorry.
We're just emailing Spala before we came on the stream, and Gerf snorted into his mic.
I'm so sorry.
But the camp is going to be very similar in layout to what we did last year. So it's going to be 4-day camp, ideally arriving the evening before. So it just depends their availability with their national team athletes and all that. That's when we can get in there. But generally speaking, we'll expect athletes to arrive the evening before, probably around 5 or 6 in the evening, eat dinner there that night, stay there that night. Then we'll train 2 sessions per day for day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. And then leave the evening of day 4 or else the morning of day 5. Obviously, no training on day 5. It runs very well. The camp facilities are fantastic. It is a really nice time for you to kind of just focus on yourself and focus on your own training. We don't really, generally, when we talk about these training camps, it's not so much about the training sessions themselves, although you get a massive amount of coaching and a massive amount of technical help, but it's more about setting you up for the next year of your training. So getting plans in place, understanding what you need to do, understanding the best path for you to follow, understanding how you might need to bring things more long-term into place to fix those technical errors you're having or fix those deficits you have within your own kind of physique or athleticism. So it's a really great, enjoyable time. It's a nice little village as well.
It's really nice. Summer in Poland is nice. It's in the forest. It is a lot of hard training too, to be fair, because people want to train in it and max out, which is always big max outs. And there's lots of PBs. Try and think about it as well. So we've got 8 sessions. Most people get, if you've 1 session per week with your coach, you're trying to pack in basically 2 months of training there, which is pretty great to work on things. Seminars are good, and seminars are an enjoyable experience. But if you really want to learn stuff, a camp is somewhere where you can get some meaningful work done. Price will be 3 meals per day. Food is really good, or well, we really liked it.
We won't mention a price now because we haven't
And
gotten a price from them.
well, I can give them an approximate price. So we were 3 meals per day, and then we had accommodation. Last year was for 4 or 5 nights, depending on if you were leaving. But the price will be somewhere around 1,600, which is excellent. That includes your accommodation and your meals. But the price isn't finalized yet because we need to see what the accommodation costs and how those changes happen. Like, a lot of people are worried sometimes about it being too new or not very good. Lots of people of all levels show up. Like, we had a gentleman show up last year who was basically just doing a bit of S&C for marathons and triathlons. And he literally was lifting in nano 10s or whatever. And he just had a great time at the camp and learned a bit of lifting. Like, he'd been doing some training for sure. So he got a lot out of it. And I know he really enjoyed it. A lot of the lads from last year's camp are keen to come back. So a lot of people are actually asked about it this year, notably of all years. Like, people are always interested in the camp, but this year seems to be particularly notable. So we'll try and get it organized as soon as possible. So it's based on those when the national team training camps get booked in. Now, we were actually there last year when the junior team was training, and we trained around them and bit them a bit as well. So the lads got to see some of the professional weightlifters training at the same time, which was great for them. And the national coach was judging them.
Not that strong says, afternoon, Sikistan. Any preferences for running twice a week to build mileage / paces when balancing strength training? What's Dara's best 5K time? My best 5K is 1906, I think, or 1907. In terms of building mileage and building pace, that's two very different things. So let's just start with mileage first. When balancing strength training, you're really looking at making sure there's not too much time on the feet and there's not too much load in your legs, right? So obviously, time on the feet, you can have very long and slow runs that will still negatively impact your strength training just because you're actually moving around for so long. This is why we really don't like, if people are running 5Ks or trying to get a better 5K time, we don't like them doing things like half marathons and stuff on a regular basis. There's no need for that length. You'll get far better bang for your buck by doing more intervals closer to race pace and building your volume in that way, rather than going out on these incredibly slow, incredibly long, and laborious runs. There is some merit in building a base of that longer running style, but by no means do you need to be doing a really long run every week, particularly if you're only going to run twice per week. What I will say is, in the initial volume accumulation phase, so when you're talking about building up your mileage, what I would start with is figuring out what that kind of critical pace will be for you. So how you can get to the point where you're able to run your 10K run pretty easily without a major drop off in pace or without major fluctuations of pace over the course of the 10K. So find what that pace is. Then once you've found that pace, 2K intervals or 2K repeats are really good. 1K repeats are really good. What I would say is, don't necessarily listen to the point where people are saying you have to do a long, slow run all the time. In terms of building pace, then, building pace is firstly about finding really good, efficient running technique. The amount of people you see, like, running has gotten so popular since COVID, and the amount of disgusting running technique that's out there at the moment is quite honestly upsetting. It's why you have so many people with so many running related stress injuries. So figure out what good running technique looks like for you. Figure out where your own particular weaknesses are, whether that's a weakness in ankle stiffness, whether that's a weakness in midline and stability, whether that's a weakness in just strength to be able to maintain positions later on in the run. Figure out what you need to do to get that running efficiency up a little bit. And then you're really looking to be running with that really efficient style and stride, and then bringing that to a pace that you're happy to run with. So if it's something where you want to go sub 20 or you want to go sub 25 minutes, just figure out what that pace is per kilometer, whether that's 4-minute kilometer, 5-minute kilometer, and then get as efficient as possible with that stride and with that running pace, and then repeat that as frequently as possible. At the start, I would expect you 100% to be comfortable at doing something 400 meters to 800 meters at that pace, and then gradually increasing the amount of those 800-meter repeats you're doing, and then gradually decreasing the amount of repeats, but increasing the distance you're doing for those repeats.
Definitely a very similar thing happened in running, where big trend happened with zone 2 was the only thing that mattered. And every single running influencer was like, longer, slower runs is better. And we fell into the trap, kind of like in strength training or physique, where it's like, oh, just one tap set or 5x5 is all you need. They also fell into that programming trap of being static with your programming. And it's definitely another thing which I've seen showing up over the years, which we see very frequently, is people really want to get stuck in to one style of training or get stuck into one format in that session. What's the best workout and what do I do and how to repeat that? And it makes perfect sense why people would think that. Now, not that strong. I'm not saying you're thinking like that, but I'm just saying it's a general trend. People start thinking about that because it's really easy to entertain in your mind. And you think all my runs are long and slow. Because when you start trying to plan out training, you start trying to plan for the future, you start trying to see what kind of progression should you do, what change in intensity, suddenly starts getting really complex. You sit down and write your own program, and then you're like, yeah, I'm going to train 4 times a week and I'm going to do 400 repeats today, and then next week I'm going to do them even faster. And then you start writing out these progressions, and then you do it and it turns into absolute nonsense or it doesn't work. And so it's hard for people sometimes to balance the complexity of training when multiple different things need to be happening at once. And if you look at any of the sports science research or literature, or if you go back further and look at the Soviets, you can look at their organizational training, and the complexity of that is difficult. If you want to achieve peak performance, you have to entertain a certain level of complexity in training. Now, it's hard again because this was, again, when you're looking at social media or YouTube, if you look at like recent stuff with, last year with people's PhDs and all this, is sometimes people use complexity as an angle to sell you things where they're trying to bamboozle you. And you're like, holy moly, this sounds so complex. And then unfortunately you get to pin them swinging the other direction like we do with a lot of things in life when it comes to culture. People just say, just lift the heavy circles, it's fine. But there's a happy medium where a bit of complexity is important. And so when trying to figure this out with running programming, trying to get faster runs is more complex than running for conditioning. So if I was using running as a conditioning tool for judo or jiu-jitsu or something like that, literally running till your legs fall off will actually work really well. And you could do the exact same workout every single week, not really get better at running, but definitely get better conditioning for your sport or judo to a certain degree. So the complexities of programming for running are quite interesting, and there's definitely a bit of nuance to those. There's a surprising amount of science, because as much science, well, I'll use that loosely if we're seeing in like muscle building and all that now, the amount of research on endurance and aerobic sports is massive because they're so popular. They've been around for decades. Tons of research are really interested in them. People like runners. It's popular sports. So there's a huge amount of complexity involved in that if you want to do that. Now, it's not so complex that you can't understand it if someone could explain it to you, but there's definitely nuance and complexity to getting better running times to be better runners.
Yeah, there's just running is far more important in the sports that bring in a lot more money than muscle building was for the last 40 years.
Yeah, definitely. Been smashing raspberries and oatmeal in the morning. Reek said, hey, fellas. Okay. So
up next, we have Christy
Cook.
Christy Cook says, early days of my S&C career or coaching career, and I find myself regularly doing things I would strongly advise my athletes against or not letting them do, like poor sleep, poor nutrition, skipping mobility, etc. Advice. So obviously as an S&C coach, it's important you walk the walk as well. But if you go and look at professional S&C coaches in most clubs, they're all in good shape. They're all pretty healthy, generally speaking. They'll all have a good level of mobility and a relatively good level of strength. But it's really important to note that you're not the athlete. I see it so often with younger coaches where their immediate go-to in terms of a coaching cue is they stand into the squat rack and they do something to show the athlete how to do it. When you're approaching athletes and when you're dealing with athletes on a daily or weekly basis, it's incredibly important that it's an understanding that you're the coach. It's not just that you're an athlete who can do the movement and show them how to do it. Like the coaching side of things, the pedagogy and teaching side of things is far, far more important than you as the coach having really good nutrition. But you have to be able to walk the walk. You have to be in pretty good shape when you're doing it. And you have to be able to do most of the movements you're going to be coaching. In terms of the athletes and them kind of seeing you do these things, it's definitely not something where you should be showing up to a squad session and saying, oh yeah, I slept terribly for the last 4 nights. You should always be putting your best face forward as a professional S&C coach. You should be emulating as many of those qualities as possible. But there is a certain line there as well. And you should be able to turn around and tell an athlete that I'm not the person playing this sport. I'm not the person being paid to play this sport. So what I'd expect of myself is slightly different from what I'd expect of you.
Yeah, it's probably just a indictment of the nature of being an S&C coach, especially the earlier on you are, where you have to get up at 5 o'clock to go coaching, 6 o'clock sessions. You're doing the 8 o'clock sessions in the evening, stuff like that. Where unfortunately, that's the nature of that kind of industry, and yeah, it's not. Yeah, it could be like that forever. So actually, to be honest, not to throw that out the window. Not that Strong said, eat clean, train hard. Andrew said, would you ever use waves for benching? Currently writing programs for my partner, and I want to build her confidence touching heavier weights while keeping appropriate volume in the program. So, yes, we would use waves at certain points in training, but not that often. And most of the times, when it comes to just purely trying to improve strength, there isn't a huge amount of need to it. Now, if it's something that specific individual, for example, your partner just finds useful for improving your confidence for heavier weights, then it can be something you can use because it's not incredibly detrimental. Our issue with waves is at some point in that set, there's something that's probably a bit more optimal. One of those waves is probably the best one to do. And so our opinion is, why not do that one? So, if it's your second or third wave, or if you're peaking up and peaking down, there's probably a better point in there where if you're trying to get a lot of volume in that session, there's a certain point in that wave within those weights that you're using that you're better off just doing straight sets of volume in most cases. And then if you're trying to improve for a top set, maybe you're trying to push it, you're better off just getting that top set and doing that top set and then usually letting it go. And you're getting less overall fatigue for that session, but then you're probably getting more productive training. So when it comes to waves for improvement, so if we're talking about going up and back down and then up, back down again, very rarely would we use that. If ever, I don't think any of our programs currently have it in terms of strength lifts, and certainly not in regards to benching. Sometimes we'll prescribe warm-up sets, for example, but typically when people talk about waves, we're going up, down again. So it's just not really something to do in a static sport or in something like the strength lifts when you're trying to get a specific stimulus. There's a percentage there that's probably going to be more productive than the other stimuluses, the other percentages. And if you do enough volume, you're going to get the training effect you want. So it's just not really something that will do. It might happen in weightlifting where the feeling, the skill, how heavy you can change your positions. You might need a little bit more time. You might need a bit more speed going on. Whereas for something like benching, it's either can you do it today and you warmed up enough, or is today not the day for it and we should leave it and come back again later, or reduce the volume or reduce the intensity somewhere to try and hit it. So you basically waves kind of introduce a lot of variability, which just isn't necessarily needed and might necessarily be tolerated the best for something like strength training because we're adding an extra volume there if we don't need it. Now, as you know, we're definitely not afraid of volume for sure, but volume for the sake of volume or wasted volume also isn't something we're a fan of.
One thing to touch on here is this idea of building confidence by getting people to touch heavier weights, right? So this is where people ask, can they do a heavy top set? Can they do some waves? Can they do some heavier working weights? Can they build up to a heavy single after they get their working sets done? And the idea here is that through exposure, someone will gain confidence. The problem with that is not the best way to gain confidence, right? So imagine this as in you're learning to ride a horse and you start with a small little pony and then gradually you get to a slightly bigger pony, then you go to a small horse, then you go to a big race horse, right? And the idea of doing waves is basically that you go small pony, big pony, small horse, race horse. And you do that frequently within the same session. Whereas realistically, there's a point across that progression where that person is actually able to do the weights really well, or they're actually able to ride that horse very, very well. And you'd never think of bringing someone through a progression like that just to get them some exposure to the more dangerous or to more difficult activity they're going to do. And it's the exact same with doing waves in training, where you're kind of going from out of the Goldilocks zone into the Goldilocks zone, out of the Goldilocks zone again, right? We really don't want to be doing this kind of cycling in and out of where people are feeling good and moving really well. You want to get more exposure to the ideal stimulus to get somebody to gain confidence. And then once they've had a certain amount of exposure at that certain level of stimulus, gradually that stimulus will be less effective. We'll have to bring in a slightly bigger or more extreme or more intense stimulus to get that same level of adaptation from it. So I get where people are coming from with this idea of touching heavy weights or unracking heavy weights in the squat to feel it on their back, but it's not the best way of doing it.
Banana Bread said Copenhagen planks fixed decades of knee pain. Genius Lads, just want to say that wasn't us, that was Rocco. So
Yeah.
Rocco was a Greek chiropractor, and amazing how well it helps some forms of knee pain. So cannot take credit for that. Rocco is an absolute wizard, and we were actually trying to see him recently, but yeah, not us. Eventually progressing the Cossack squats are Copenhagen better. Copenhagen are definitely better.
Yeah.
Cossack squats are good exercise, and they're definitely good, especially if you're someone who's kind of lacky a bit internal rotation, then we can quite useful improving that. But in terms of direct adductor work, what you can do is start loading up your hip, increasing the time, increasing the volume, or doing the Copenhagen drill. So if you saw that video, which I assume you have if you're going by the Copenhagen planks for knee pain, unless you're just doing it on one of the programs. But basically, it's one where you touch your hip onto the floor, and then you bring your hip back up again to parallel with the floor, touch your hip down again. It's the Copenhagen plank drill, which is a good progression. And then, of course, you could do that with some isometrics, or you could do that with some isometrics and some weight. So there's a lot of options here, but staying in the Copenhagen plank village is the best option. Cossack village isn't really...
Cossack village is
not a bad idea, but it's not going to do... The adductors are great like that. The only other option is if you have the adductor machine, which, unless you're in a commercial gym, isn't common.
Electric Throw says good athletes aren't coming through Scottish throwing.
No, you missed.
Oh, sorry. Adam Thornton says...
No, don't be sorry. Just do it better.
Is it okay to run upper body armor alongside... Or sorry, body armor upper alongside the weightlifting program? Yeah, it absolutely is. That's what that program is kind of written for, is to bolt on top of any of the other programs. The body armor program is basically upper body bodybuilding. So hypertrophy work to make you a small bit more resilient, to make you a small bit more jacked in the upper body. It's a great program. It's really nice bolt on top of your other work.
Good athletes are not coming through in Scottish throwing when they can play rugby instead. They're not coming through in rugby either. I'm joking. Okay. So what are your thoughts on using a hip thrust machine with a band ballistically for high intent leg work? Still can't really back squat heavy or do weightlifting due to my back injury from August 24. I've been doing 4x6 and ragdolling the machine, but I don't want to be spinning on wheels. So Andrew, in your specific case, because we have a decent idea, this is going to spin your wheels. This isn't really doing anything for you. Now, some training is absolutely always better than no training unless you're re-irritating an injury. So in terms of the threshold of going from doing nothing to doing something, this is going to stimulate, obviously, the lower body better. We just never really used hip thrust. The only case we'll use a hip thrust or a glute bridge or a single leg glute bridge is possibly in a rehab scenario where that needs to be addressed if there's maybe a unilateral imbalance. When it comes to someone like you, in your case, the idea of using a hip thrust or weighted hip thrust or band resisted hip thrust doesn't enter the equation. The stimulus you get from it, the outputs just doesn't seem to be there, in our opinion, for what you want for your particular scenario. What I would be looking at doing here, of course, if this is the only thing you're restricted to in terms of your training, then keep doing it. And if it's not injuring your back and you feel like you're getting some stimulus for your legs, that's perfect. Really what we'd be looking at here is some kind of alternative somewhere else. Could you, for example, if it's a back injury, could you maybe do some bell squats? Is it even belt squats a half range of motion? Could you be doing barbell squats to a box, a really high box? Is there anything you could do that would take your hip through some amount of flexion and back to extension that would stimulate your legs a bit better, specifically what you're looking for as well, Andrew, for throwing? So anything at all. Is it heel elevate goblet squats? You know, if you have a 60-kilo dumbbell in the gym, can you get up something useful? Last time I remember you squatting was at 210 for reps. Did you get plus 220, 230 or more? So you're just trying to look at, is there anything at all you can do that will stimulate the legs through a reasonable range of motion, however that might be loaded? God forbid it might be loaded as Zercher squats, for example. Is it heavy single leg work?
Oh.
Is it heavy isometric Bulgarian split squats, for example, where you just hold 2 kettlebells? Is there anything you can take your legs through where that joint angle is changing a bit more at the knee and then hopefully at the hip to a certain extent? And how much does that impact the lower back injury there? The hip thrusts, just not something we use, doesn't really seem to produce much of a stimulus for what we want from training. So for you in your scenario, for someone who's looking to throw more weight, be more powerful, and for someone who's always really crossed the threshold for being very, very strong already, this just probably isn't going to do a whole lot in terms of your training. So I'd be looking for different options here, like box squats, high box squats, belt squats, even if it's half range of motion belt squats, doing a single leg work, quad extensions, hamstring curls, Nordic falls, load those up, get kind of aggressive with them. But for me, the hip thrust machine isn't really doing anything for you, or I don't see it being that impactful. There's surely other ways around this. And if there's not, what is going on in the back injury? Like, that's quite a while for it to still be in a scenario where you're not able to do something. You also said not back squat heavy, which means it sounds like you can back squat light, which would probably even be better than this still. Brana Bread said, external rotation of feet in weightlifting. Some athletes who have pierced toes pointed straight forward in the snatch and clean with virtually no external rotation. Should it be copied simply a function of hip anatomy?
What you're looking at here is the inter-individual differences between relatively elite athletes. There is a framework. The framework is around 10 degrees of external rotation with the toes, which is where most people will sit. Their feet will be roughly hip width apart and they'll be slightly toed out to the side. You're going to see the extremes of some athletes with 30 or 40 degrees of external rotation and their feet directly in underneath each other. You'll see some of the Japanese athletes with their heels almost touching. You'll then see some Belarusian athletes with super wide stances. You'll see some people with toes pointed straight ahead. Is that something you should copy? Absolutely not. Most of those inter-individual differences are coming from the point of a death.
The camera?
Camera gone? Are we still live?
Okay, so audio still there. So the camera gone off?
Show me over a battery there.
Should I plug that in?
It is plugged in, yeah, but it's battery is so low in it, like.
Oh, weird.
Are we back?
Not yet. Give it a second. Oh, we're back. Hey. Hey, we're back. All right.
Okay, so is this something you should copy? Absolutely not. Anytime we see these extremes happening, so these deviations from a framework to the point of almost absurdity, it's usually due to a deficit in someone's strength or a deficit in their range of motion. It might also be due to an imbalance. You would have seen Dmitry Klokov with a staggered stance in his snatch and in his clean pull. It is not something you should be emulating. So what we really want to see is we want to find a framework that works really well for us. The Central European framework works great for pretty much everyone. If you're looking to follow something, get the EWF manual and look at that and use those positions and try and follow that as closely as possible. We then get the follow-on question of, oh, but what about if I have this particular deficit? Or what about if I have long legs and this lifter has long legs? Should I do what they do? I still would say no, because the framework in the general sense is always going to be better than your tiny inter-individual difference, or your moderate difference between you and what a standard person would be. So there is certainly functions of people's hip anatomies being slightly different. Some people will have to be more toed out to get the same level of external rotation. Some people will be incredibly mobile through external rotation and have almost no internal rotation, which will catch them in the bottom position. All of these things, or with all of this being said, I wouldn't start copying people you're seeing. A lot of it is an aesthetic thing, or a lot of it is you like the lifter, so you then want to lift like that lifter. But if you want to lift the heaviest weights with the best technique and get the furthest in the sport, you're better off following as close to the framework as possible.
Finn says, "Hey lads, quick question. If you had to pick a deadlift accessory, such as snatch, grip, pause, or deficit, etc., what would you believe is best? I'm trying to get from a 260 kilo deadlift to 300 kilo deadlift by next year. Without a doubt, the high bar back squat is the best assistance exercise you could use from this, especially when you're someone who's on the stronger end of the spectrum, where you're going to be going from 260, which is an incredibly respectful deadlift, to 300 kilos, which is an absolutely enormous deadlift. And if you can do 260, there's probably a massive chance you can get to 300 very, very close to it. The reason I say the high bar back squat, first of all, I'm disappointed you didn't watch the 3-part series we just did a couple of weeks ago during Christmas on just the deadlift. But the high bar back squat or related exercises are incredibly useful for the deadlift. So there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the deadlift trains your back incredibly well. Whether you use the eccentric or not, you're still loading your back really well. You're getting a lot of weight through that. And any kind of deadlift form, no matter how good or bad, is going to be putting a lot of stimulus on your back. Now, the other thing, though, or the ironic thing, is that you're using your legs in good deadlift technique, or at least we believe in the conventional, quite an amount from the floor and all the way through into the lockout of the deadlift. The funny thing is, though, is that the deadlift doesn't really train the legs that well. There's not a huge amount of stimulus. But what we know is that there's a huge relationship between improving your quad or your leg strength specifically and your ability to extend your hips and your knees with a lot of weight and how much weight you can lift on the deadlift. Very routinely, what we'll see is people will add kilos to their squat first. And I'm specifically talking about their high bar squat, so full range of motion squat, or as close to that as you can get, and the relationship then quickly after with a heavier deadlift from the floor. So first of all, it's leg strength. Then also with the high bar squat, you can load it up very heavy. You get a lot of coordination between the back and the legs. So it helps that kind of overall skill development between, if you're a good high bar squatter, you're probably someone who's got good coordination. And as a result, this can help even more then when you go to the deadlifts, because it's a reasonably complex skill. And that coordination under heavy weights is something that's important then when you get deadlifting. So without a doubt, I would say the high bar squat is great. Now, the following question from this is, but I don't like the high bar squat. Can I do safety bar squats? That's the voice I use. You can use them, and I'm definitely not going to say that if you end up repping 260 kilos on the safety bar squat, that you're not going to get a benefit on your deadlift or your safety bar squat to your deadlift. That definitely happens. There's no real reason for you to avoid the high bar squat. What we see when I'm talking about that kind of coordination and those positions is that upper body position is trained a little bit better. You've got better upper back tightness, and this helps train that a little bit more for the deadlift. We just don't see quite the same relationship between a safety bar squat and the high bar squat to deadlift. But I'm not saying there's no relationship. Again, if you really just don't want to do the high bar squat and you refuse to learn it or put effort into it, the safety squat bar will work really well. And then obviously there's assistance. There's a tier list of assistance exercises underneath that. Belt squats are going to help your squat, which will in turn help your deadlift. Heavy Bulgarian split squats can be very useful, especially when you're driving into the floor with both legs. You'd be surprised at the discrepancy you could have. And obviously, while you might be able to do something in spite of having a bit of discrepancy, you could also get a lot of benefit if you even that out a little bit more or get one leg working as well or as close to well as the other leg. So some heavy unilateral work can be very, very beneficial here. But a full range of motion squat, whatever form that takes for you, preferably high bar squat, works very, very well. So that would undoubtedly be the first one. In terms of variations for the deadlift, we don't really use them too often when it comes to directly supporting the deadlift. So we use variations in weightlifting, we use variations for athletes, and there's obviously the Romanian deadlifts, deficit deadlifts at times when it's needed. Snatch grip deadlifts might feature in a weightlifting program. But when it comes to variations of the deadlift For the deadlift, the main one we use most frequently is usually a pause at the knee, because very often what happens is people will swing their hips up a little bit too fast. Their shoulders will move in front of the barbell too soon, or well, basically, which we don't ever really want that in the deadlifts. And as well, their knees move back. So we shift a lot of load to the posterior, the lower back in particular, and then we lack that leg drive. It makes the lockout very hard. So if you want to train that position where you keep using the legs off the floor, a pause of the knee deadlifts becomes very, very useful for that. So that's the most common variation we'll use. Now, of course, RDLs and deficits and stuff like that obviously feature, but they're specific for athletes and scenarios for their sport maybe, or something like that, rather than this is going to be great for the deadlift.
Finn has a second part to his question now, which is
part 2.
Funny enough. He says, also, do you believe that to have a big deadlift, you need a big squat, i.e. no more than 30 or 40 kilos between the two? So this idea of the gap between our deadlift and our squat isn't necessarily the most important thing. But what I want is talking about here is making progress in the deadlift through forced progress in the squat. So it's not necessarily that there's an ideal bandwidth where one has to sit within 20, 30, 40 kilos of the other, or within 80, 85, or 90% of the other. But it's very important, if you want to get the most progress out of your deadlift, that you're seeing or you're preempting that with progress in the squat by getting stronger legs, stronger back, being a small bit more athletic through that increase in prowess in the squat. So it's not necessarily that there's an ideal gap, because there are certain people who will be very, very close between their squat and their deadlift. Like you'll be very close between your squat and your deadlift. And then some people will be astronomically big. And it's not necessarily that's the issue. But what we're talking about here, and the real value to be gleaned from the squat, is pushing your squat number up and then your deadlift number following up from there.
Ryan is asking about minor procedure, returning to training. Do we need to test maxes or just knock off 15 kilos 3 weeks away from recovery training?
So Ryan, with this, we have a rule of thumb, right? With time off training due to sickness, illness, or whatever, or vacations. When you're taking time off, 1 week off, it means you regress 1 week in the program. 2 weeks off means you regress 2 weeks in the program. More than 2 weeks off, which you're in this bracket here with 3 weeks off, it's you go back to the start of the block, right? It doesn't matter if you're on week 2 or week 7 of a training cycle, you're going to go back to the start. With this, right, whether it's an illness, whether it's a procedure like it is in your case, you have to take certain other considerations in, right? The first is, did that procedure directly affect, or did that illness directly affect any aspect of my training, right? If that procedure was removal of a skin tag or a mole from your pec, right, it won't make any difference to your back squats. You're able to go back and train. It'll be all good. If that procedure, however, was on removing a bony process from the proximal humeral head, then that's obviously going to affect your ability to bench press. And so you have to have a return to play protocol, right? You'll have to have some level of physio or physical therapy. You'll have to do something to get you back to training. So that's the other consideration here is, I know I've had enough time off where I need to restart the block. Now, did that procedure in any way affect my ability to do the training that I'm trying to do? Or did the illness cause me to lose so much weight where I'm not the same kind of physical unit that I was before? The last thing here is the idea of knocking 15 kilos off your max is actually a good idea, right? Generally speaking, we won't say it's 15 kilos. Generally saying we'll take around 10 or 15% off our max lifts that we used last time. Use that for the initial 2 or 3 weeks of training. So you're going to go through week 1, week 2, and probably week 3 of training. Even if things feel excessively light in week 1, don't change anything. If they feel excessively light in week 2, don't change anything. But once we get past that initial kind of week or 2 of the first block, we can then come in and bump those numbers up. You can do it super easily in the app. You just press that little gear icon next to the name of your program on the home screen. You can bump those numbers up once you've done the initial 2 weeks.
Hi, lads. How long do you think heavy singles can be programmed for snatch and clean and jerk? Gable mentioned the Clarence about hitting 90% weekly, but is that more for elite or enhanced lifters? So heavy in weightlifting is 90% plus, so anything above that would be considered a heavy single. Now, in terms of the average person or people who are programmed for most often, and people who are not enhanced, 90% plus is probably something You can touch every 4 to 5 weeks if you want to. It's not necessary. Sometimes you could do it every 6 weeks, or say week 5 and 6, you're touching 90% and 90% or more. And then you repeat that again every 4 or 6 weeks. So in a 12-week block, you have the option to touch it twice, maybe 4 times, probably in a lot of those cases. So we might have the heavy week before we go for a max, and then we have that max out week next, or heavy singles. Anything more than that is usually very unfeasible because, one, it probably won't happen. You probably won't be able to hit those numbers very frequently. Or if you do, it's basically a shoo-in that the rest of your training is going to go to shit, so you're not going to get any meaningful, productive work to support your ability. So try and think about 90% being supported by 80% reps, and then 80% reps supported by 70%, and then kind of below that, it starts to peter off being not quite meaningful. So we need to work through those bands to support that average athlete's ability to hit 90% and then go beyond that. Now, the thing here is probably a good indicator is if someone's able to hit 90% or more frequently throughout the week or more often, they're almost certainly using quite an amount of PD. So if you see people just lifting massive weights all the time, that's probably a good indicator that they're an enhanced athlete. And I think obviously, as Dylan has talked about, he's using PDs and he's going full gas basically on this training block. And you can see him pretty much every session. I try and watch the live streams when I get a chance. You know, he's going as heavy as he can as often as possible. And that's the benefits of an enhanced athlete. Anton was talking before when he was training on the Georgian team. Obviously, Anton tested positive. You know, it's not really a secret. He couldn't do those max out Fridays every week where he's hitting those big numbers. He said he used to basically watch Lasha and all, and to see Lasha every week at the training block. This week it's 200, next week it's a 205 snatch, then it's a 210 snatch. He said even though Lasha's hip would be sore, his elbow would be sore, his quad would be sore, it'd be 215 today, he'd hit 215. So obviously genetics play a part in this as well, but also being enhanced as well. So if you see people just lifting enormous weights and they're doing it really consistently, that's one of the benefits of PEDs. That's one of the benefits of stepping on the gas, going full gas, is that you can just do that regularly. And the benefit of that is that if you put a weighted value, 10 being the most productive rep you could do, and if you get 90% or plus is pretty much a 10. And then below that, then we start reducing that weighted value and then start being a little bit less productive. So 10 being this has the most beneficial effect on my chance at hitting a new one at max, pretty much at 90% or above is going to have the most meaningful amount of progress. But you can't really do that every week unless you're enhanced.
Marcus Boxall says, how much of a difference will it make pushing accessories very close to failure versus hard but not really so close to failure to the final 1RM increase? So the setup of this question would mean that pushing accessories excessively hard to failure will make a bigger difference and increase that 1RM more. Is that necessarily true? Absolutely not. When we look at an accessory movement, the most important thing to keep in mind that the accessory movement is playing a secondary or tertiary role in our overall development for that increased 1RM. So if we're looking at something like a weightlifter, they'll have snatches and clean and jerk, which are primary movements. They'll have their back squats and pulls and presses, which are their main strength movements, and then they have their accessories. The accessories are in the third tier of importance here. And if we were to take something like an accessory, let's say weighted planks, and going all the way to failure in every session, or even if it's something like pull-ups, going to failure in every session, pushing them as hard as you can because you're a winner and you want a bigger 1RM number, you'll almost certainly have a smaller 1RM number by the end of the training cycle. The accessory movements are accessories to the program, where the primary movements we're doing in training are there to bring up our overall performance in terms of whatever that number is or whatever that movement is. The accessories are there to support the training. So we should never be at the point where we're driving the accessories to failure at every single point in the program. There are certainly periods in every training block where accessories will get quite difficult. There are certainly certain accessory exercises that people might find difficult and might often come up against the roadblock of failure. The classic example here will be in pull-ups. Heavier athletes who mightn't be that well developed for doing pull-ups will oftentimes go to failure on a pull-up set. Is that overall detrimental to their training cycle? Absolutely not, because they're probably getting 4 or 5 pull-ups done and then having to go to assisted reps by the end of it. They're not at the point where those 4 or 5 reps are really detrimental, because it's just not that much training. They're not actually at the point where they can do enough training to be detrimental to their overall progress. But certainly you shouldn't be pushing your accessories in that fashion.
Cameron said, halfway through a GPP phase, doing body armor, assault bike, and high volume squats with some position tweaks, weightlifting once a week, snatch balance, and behind the neck jerks for positions and novelty thoughts. I'm definitely a big fan of conditioning for GPP phase for weightlifting. Absolutely. Obviously, we're massive fans of assistance exercises and quote unquote kind of bodybuilding exercises for weightlifting. So we've covered 2 things there: body armor, giving you your assistance exercises, and specifically the upper body work, which is lacking in a lot of weightlifters, and the strength in the upper body, and to a certain extent, the amount of muscle mass you have. You've also got your conditioning covered because you're doing the assault bike. The assault bike is obviously in the short term pretty detrimental to your weightlifting power output. That kind of pizzazz or pop will be reduced a little bit. But I mean, the day after, and that's about it. But if you're doing those high intensity assault bikes, but if you're in a GPP phase, that's perfectly acceptable. So our idea here is, can we build some muscle? Can we build some work capacity? And this will make me into a person who's in a great position to tolerate better weightlifting training loads, which it sounds like this would. High volume squats is great as well for that work capacity. And hopefully then, dare I say, the volume will also help build some muscle in your legs, especially for someone who's weightlifting and hasn't probably done a lot of higher volume squats throughout most of the year. Now, snatch balance behind the neck jerks for novelty is probably a third thing we really do like to see for a GPP phase, is the fact that weightlifting could become, in some ways, a psychological burden for some people, or a bit monotonous. Now, in other ways, it's incredibly complex. So the novelty can come from different positions or folk in different aspects during the snatch, the clean and jerk. And because these are so fluid and often require a consistent focus on those, lest those positions slip away, whether that's not bending your arms or extending more aggressively, it keeps the novelty pretty high. But in terms of psychological load, if you are continually doing weightlifting blocks, a period where you essentially just stop doing some of the weightlifting, even if it's for a few weeks, if it's for 4 or 5 weeks, and unless you're brand new to weightlifting, you're going to be okay. And even if you're brand new to weightlifting, you're still going to be okay. It doesn't make a huge difference. Specifically, you're taking a few steps back to go ahead. And if you find yourself very just overdoing the snatch and clean and jerk for a little bit of a period of time, taking a bigger step away can be useful for that novelty, because again, this might last 2 months. You've still got 10 more months basically in the rest of the year to push through and keep doing snatches and clean and jerks. So playing the long game is good there, and having something for novelty for weightlifters is great, because it is pretty monotonous. Most sports have that in and off season, or if they don't, they're probably a highly complex sport with multiple different things to focus on. So the monotony doesn't get there. But for some people, the novelty of not doing assistance exercise or variations that you do is something, or you don't normally do when you're training, can be very, very useful, like the snatch balance and behind the neck jerks, where you're still training some of the qualities, but you're not over emphasizing it. So yeah, I like that.
Do we have Fidel next?
Fidel, how much Buttwink is okay when back squatting?
There is no full correct answer you can give here. The unfortunate thing with Buttwink is sometimes an amount of movement through the neutral range of the lower back isn't going to be detrimental to the squat. And sometimes even a small amount of movement, if the back is already in a non-ideal position, we've already gone through a non-ideal motor pattern to get us into that position, I would see as that leading to some damage or some wear that mightn't necessarily be the best thing for us. For me as a coach, when I'm watching a video of an athlete or when I'm watching an athlete in person, what I'm really looking for is things outside of normal range of extension. And to be honest, with Buttwink, a lot of what we see or perceive as Buttwink is we're overly extended through that lumbar spine. Then as I set into that squat position at parallel, we'll probably hit a standard amount of extension in the lumbar spine. And then I might even go into kind of less than ideal amount of extension, right? So extension is this, right? My chest is here, my butt is here. That's what extension is, coming back like this very slightly. Lots of us will reach into this overly extended lower back position, really looking for a feeling of tightness and a feeling of contraction with the erectors in our back. And we'll bring ourselves into this overly extended position. No matter what happens, I won't be able to maintain that overly extended position through my lower back. And then as I sit down, particularly as I get to parallel in the squat, I'll have to get away from that slight amount of overextension. I'll probably just be going from overextension to standard neutral. And this will appear as Buttwink if I'm watching it from the side, or if I just gradually glance over as you're kind of sitting down through the squat. So firstly, make sure you're setting yourself in the correct position. Correct position with our back isn't a fully flat back. Correct position is a natural amount of lumbar extension. Make sure we're bracing appropriately through our midline. And then if we're sitting down and if I see flexion coming into that lumbar, then at that point, I feel like that is too much Buttwink.
So like Dara said, how much Buttwink is okay is not fully answered. It's entirely up to you or your coach or whoever's helping you or you as an individual. What we usually see is that if there's an excessive amount of Buttwink, it's not that we think the Buttwink is necessarily going to be a problem for you in the long run. It's that the Buttwink is a symptom of something probably being an issue. So whether that's technical, so you're not holding those positions like Dara's talking about, you're not holding a good position, there's probably a mobility issue there, which would give you the opportunity to have a better squat, maybe where it's deeper, maybe it's a position to use your legs a little bit better at the bottom, whether it's to get a little bit more upright so you could use your legs a little bit more efficiently. So if there's a Buttwink, it could be the mobility in the hips lacking, it could be the ankles lacking. So if the knees can't drive as far forward, the lower back will kind of crumple at the bottom. It'll stack up over itself into this kind of rounded position. And then if we're not able to drive our knees as far forward, we're thinking, okay, we're not getting as much out of a squat as we want because we primarily want it to be a leg exercise. So in that case, using the legs is an issue. And so we're saying that the Buttwink is a symptom of something that we can improve elsewhere. Now, we'll probably see that anyway. It'll be pretty obvious if the ankles are particularly tight, you'll see it, but the Buttwink will be a symptom of that. We're not really worried in the fact that, oh God, this athlete has a ton of Buttwink. We need to stop squatting. Their back is going to explode and they're going to shit out their intestines or something like that. It's more a case of, okay, he's got a lot of Buttwink or she's got a lot of Buttwink. What are we missing here? And in most cases, we've probably already going to address it, or we've already seen the issue, and then the Buttwink will clear up with that. So the Buttwink is kind of a peripheral issue in the fact that the performance and mobility could be improved, and the squat could be more beneficial, or you could get more out of the squat, or you could do a better quality squat. If we solve those issues, and as a result, then the Buttwink will also be cured or solved in that issue. I'm never worried, really, if it's going to cause an injury risk to specific flexion of the lower back. The only cases there is if someone is flexion or extension intolerant in the lower back, it can aggravate that. That's a whole different ball game. They're a particular athlete in a scenario in the same way that if squatting's hurting my knee, I don't squat as heavy, but I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and stop squatting because I figure out what's causing the issue or try and rehab it and then come back to squatting. So the Buttwink, how much is okay, it's up to you. I'm not convinced right now that it's totally fine and there's no issue, but I'm also in no way convinced that it's very, very scary. I'm just pretty neutral. We're both very open. If someone comes out with very conclusive and good quality research, they're like, oh, look, there's like a 20% higher chance that if you have a lot of Buttwink, you're going to injure your back, then that'll be interesting. I'll take that into account and communicate it to people or whatever. But in most cases, the Buttwink is a symptom of something else that needs to be fixed. So then we'll go and fix it. So it's not that we're fixing the Buttwink per se, we're fixing the peripheral issues around that because they're probably going to make the squat more productive or more effective.
Finn says, finally, when programming your deadlift, is it best to go off a non-hitched max and a clean rep, even if you train for strongman?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
the real thing you have to look at here. So you have to be using that clean max, or what people might refer to as a technical max or technically perfect max lift. Why you're doing that is, right, in training the hitch itself is not a skill. No matter what people might tell you, training a secondary position is not a skill. It's not the best tool to get better at the deadlift. You doing 6 sets of 3 at 80% with a hitch deadlift is not as effective as you doing 6 sets of 3 at 80% with a perfectly clean deadlift rep. It's just not. You won't develop the same amount of neurological drive. You won't develop the same amount of muscle tissue from it. Nothing about the hitched reps will be better, except maybe practicing hitching, right? So, with that being said, one of the most important things when we're planning a training block is having actual realistic numbers in there for our 1RM numbers from which we'll get our percentages. So you have to be using the clean, technically perfect reps. It's the same in weightlifting. It's the same in powerlifting. It's the same for all other athletes. Your 1RM numbers you're inputting should be perfect reps.
Is Impan's just saying HIIT is well documented? Yeah, it's a ton of research on HIIT. See, there's well, when it comes to research on these things, with running or conditioning, it's so easy to get pretty much any number of participants, university or not, students. If you need 20 males or 40 females or a mixed group or whatever of a certain age, and just getting people to running, most people are like, I know what running is. Or if you're like, oh, I wanted to do assault bike intervals or stationary bike intervals, so much easier to get that research done. And there's probably a big chance that the researcher understands it really well. But when you start doing things like, I need someone with a double body weight back squat that's below parallel to the research. I remember I had to do like 3 of these when I was in university because there were so people on site in university, and there was a sports S&C masters being run at the time, and it was new enough, and they needed people who had legitimate squats. And every time I was like, where could I find someone with a double body weight back squat? So this became pretty common. But finding someone like that, or finding someone with like 2 years of resistance training, becomes very difficult. Whereas finding the effects of HIIT training on someone, like, you can become as proficient in 4 weeks at HIIT training, whereas 6 years of strength training might mean nothing. Whereas you're either pushing yourself to that higher limit or not in HIIT training and stuff like that. So it's just usually easier to get those styles of studies done as well, which isn't necessarily a problem.
Crust Robot or Cust Robot says, which sports would you like to add and remove from the summer stroke winter Olympics? For me, get rid of soccer, get rid of sevens rugby, get rid of basketball immediately, right? They take up so much of the schedule. They take up so much of the athlete resources because they're big team sports and they have no place there. They're well-funded, well-resourced, well-followed sports. Get out of it. Nobody wants to watch the under-19s team play against some other random, it's not the place of the Olympics to be hosting those. As well, having golf in there, right? It's class that those millionaire golfers get to play golf for their country. It's amazing. Is it right to have that in the Olympics? To be honest, I don't think it is. Like, golf as a sport is incredibly insular. I don't see golf as a sport doing outreach with other sports around the world and trying to help those other sports progress. I also don't necessarily see them doing a massive amount of outreach in less well-to-do countries. Like, it's not something where globally golf is reaching out to all these other nations and trying to develop the level of physical activity that's happening within those nations. It's really not. It's also not physically developing athletes and physically developing children and adolescents to make them fitter and stronger. Granted, S&C in golf has gotten way better, but it's not something where you get all 10-year-olds playing golf in school and now suddenly your population becomes much fitter and stronger because of it. I would get rid of those sports. I don't think they have any place there. It's cool. It's cool for the host nation to be doing those things, and you see their professional athletes coming back, like basketball coming back, and you see some cool players. But in my opinion, get rid of it. It's not the place of the Olympics. The last thing I would say is there's like flag football coming in for LA, and flag football, tag rugby, all of these are derivatives of the original sport, which have no place in the Olympics. Like, tag football is for people who can't play football. Tag rugby is for people who can't play rugby. It doesn't have a place at the Olympics. If we're being honest, it is not the ultimate expression of what that sport is. Sevens rugby, very much along the same lines. Sevens rugby has a cool international tour running. That's your thing, right? It's not. I don't see them having a place at the Summer Olympics.
I think we should add something like FIFA Street. Would be
Indoor soccer?
yeah, but like it has to be skills and tricks. So that would be way more interesting than soccer.
Just one more thing. At the Winter Olympics, I would love another biathlon style sport that had another test in there. So obviously, biathlon's a massive aerobic test followed by a really high precision element. Could we get that to the point where we have some other level of physical test in there along with the precision element? I think that could be a really cool event.
Okay, we might just pick a few.
Pick one or two.
So Elliot's asking, afternoon lads, any advice for planning training blocks when expecting my first child? Thanks. Yes, Elliot, I do. So first thing you need to accept is that you shouldn't be training any training blocks because for the first 6 months, in my opinion, you should be all in on being a new father, a new parent, and that's the main priority. Now, this is for the benefit of the new person you've made, and you need to make sure that you lean into this super hard and make sure that everyone is being assisted and helped, and the mother of the child and the child are both being incredibly well taken care of. And training needs to take a back seat. I'm saying this because when you lean into those and you accept that this is the new role for now, this is something where you can very easily be psychologically okay with the rest of training. So for the first 6 months, don't expect anything from training. Just coast along, see how it goes. If you have time for good sessions, you do, great, because you have no idea physically or psychologically what this is really going to be like. So it's almost nearly impossible for you to plan like this because you're making a new person and you've no idea what the adaptations like this are going to be like because you don't know how well the baby's going to sleep, how often they're going to sleep, how it's going to change you psychologically, how it's going to affect your partner and the mother of the child, how that is going to be for them. So for the first couple of months, people ask this, they're always really worried about the training block. And my answer is unless you're a professional athlete, just see how it goes. Just relax, just let it go, just enjoy training. If you're weightlifting, do some weightlifting sessions when you can do them, do a bit of snatching, clean and jerky and squatting. But just, it's okay. Training will come back. If you're not a professional athlete, it's just not that important right now. However, once the first 6 months are up, then you have to get over it. There's no more excuses. You're either back in training or you're reducing your frequency and you're accepting that you don't have as much time to train now and training might not be as useful. Or you're going to say, right, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that my priority is, of course, still being a great father, but I'm going to train as much as I can, and I'm not going to make any excuses for my own training because I have a child and a family to take care of. You're going to do your best to train. You're not going to make any weird reels where you're going to talk about being a tired dad and then getting on with it, which I find very fucking strange, but that's my personal opinion. You're just going to get on with training. You're not going to make excuses about having a child now and how training is really hard. You're just going to shut up about it and you're going to get training after the 6 months. Other thing you need to do for that 6 month period, the only thing you should really be concerned about is do not, under any circumstances, get fat. Don't gain any body fat. It's so common and it'll be even harder because training will be a little bit more adverse later. Things get easier as they get older to a certain degree, but within the confines of the next 2 years, year and a half, say, things are going to be very different for you in some ways. So the best thing you can do is just don't get fat because all this requires is you don't eat like an asshole. So you just track calories. You make sure that you're not eating too much. You don't have to be shredded or anything like that, but just not getting fat because once you do get back to training and get into a routine of giving yourself an opportunity to get used to training again, you'll be like, whoa, okay, I can just kind of start from a good baseline here. I can figure out what kind of training I want to do. You can figure out how you get to training. But if you try and get to that baseline, because you're going to be detrained a little bit, and you're really fat, now you have to be like, jam, is main gaining real? And it won't be. And then you'll have to do a cut or figure out how to lose that body weight or accept that you're fat now and get back training. So the one thing you can do that is within your control, despite sleep loss, is just count the calories and just make sure you don't get fat and gain any body weight. You might even lose a little body weight. I'm actually more okay with that than not. Losing a bit of body weight is fine. You might lose some muscle mass. That's fine. That'll come back pretty easily. But for most people, especially in the performance side of things, when it comes back to it and if you've gained a lot of body weight, it's just pretty annoying because it upsets the next few months after that once you get training again. So just super conscious of body fat levels. If you're in a skilled sport, Elliot, I'm pretty sure weightlifting, just practicing the skill more than the intensity is way more important, because the intensity and stuff will come back, because you need to build momentum in training. So if you can just make sure that you're familiar with it, if you're doing jiu-jitsu, if you're judo, whatever it is, you play darts, golf, who knows, just practicing the skill element of your sport is really useful. It's also psychologically the lowest. It's physically the lowest as well in most cases. So just going through the motions of the movement and the motor patterns you want are not as costly, because 60% snatches versus no snatches is incredibly useful for maintaining that skill. And, 1 hour of jiu-jitsu is far better than no hours of jiu-jitsu each week and practicing it, no matter how bad your intensity or conditioning gets. So in those cases, leaning in to the skill side of your sport is a great way of maintaining it, and it's to keep you happy and mentally. Look, the initial period of having a baby is a big adjustment, but you'll be fine. Millions, billions, and billions of humans have done this before you. Generations have done it. It just isn't the most productive to good training unless you're a professional athlete and you can make those sacrifices. In most cases, you will have to go back to work pretty soon after. And, that priority of making sure that money is coming in and everybody is well taken care of is a priority. And so I find it's really important accepting psychologically that training for now isn't that important, because what's going to happen is either you're going to neglect your family, which is terrible, or you're going to try not neglect your family, and you're going to be torn between like, oh, I had a 4-week block planned and now I can't do it. And then you're annoyed at that. And then you're not being as good a family man or father as you can. So both of these are messed up. Whereas if you just accept, if you're injured and your knee was sore, you say, damn, I'd love to be training, but my knee is sore. Think of this like an injury in some ways. Think, okay, I can't go training now because this is a priority. And you'll be much happier if you can accept that training's going to return. If you're a freak athlete and you've big numbers, you'd know by now, and it'd be probably happening for you. So for everyone else, it's okay to take a little bit of time where isn't in the chat every week someone's asking, my expecting a child soon, what do I do? And in most cases, it's like, why don't we run this program twice a week? Why don't you run the horse program twice a week? Why don't you do the weightlifting program twice a week? Tailor back the maxes a little bit. And especially when you're on the app, you're like, okay, I've a nice progression ahead of me. I know the weights are scaled back a little bit. I know I've put in 85%, 80% of these lifts. There's no pressure on the sessions, but I know that I've got some nice structure coming into the gym. But I know that it's not like every day I have to go training. Every day I'm like, okay, I've got to go to the gym, because most people don't have the luxury of training at home. So one of my big things was building a training shed at home, was to make sure that when my child was there, that I could just train. Like I talked about during the year where I got my blue belt in 300 kilo squat, most of my training sessions were done after 8 p.m. Most of the squat sessions were done at like 9:30 at night. And so trying to facilitate that. Now, obviously that was pretty intense, but for the first 6 months, I just literally did jiu-jitsu when I had an opportunity, and I weightlifted like once a week, once every 2 weeks. So a lot of people use the app and just reduce the frequency of the programs, because then you have a nice bit of structure. So you feel like you've got something there for you, but you're not in a position where, you're like, oh, I've got 4 days done this week. I missed this week. I missed next week. Whereas even at the worst, if you're still committed to training when you have a newborn, 2 sessions, I think, is always feasible.
Okay.
Do you have anything you want to answer?
No, I think I need to go.
Okay. Thanks for all your questions. We'll see you again on Tuesday. Excuse me, I just burped again. Monday or Tuesday, we'll be back for another live stream. And thanks for all your questions. Check out the video yesterday on chest up and the back squat. Great little video, I thought.
Video.
Me personally, I think it's a great video. Details for the Poland camp will be released as soon as we know. We just have to wait for the dates. Prices, again, as I say, certainly no more than 1,700. That's for accommodation and 3 nights, I would imagine, unless things have changed drastically in Poland. Last year was like 1,500, was it 1,600?
1,600 last year.
Yes.
We'll see. Once we hear back with dates, we'll know the price.
Yeah. And then we'll get people booked in. I reckon it'll book out pretty fast this year. One thing, if you're coming to the camp, do not book your spot until your holidays at work are approved.
Yes.
Because a few people last year booked their spot, paid a deposit. Actually happens every year. And then they're like, oh, work didn't approve my time off. Do not. We give people back the deposits, and every year we're like, we're not going to do it this year. But God help you.
Every single time.
If you email us and be like, oh, work didn't approve it, I can't go. Well,
yeah, we're blacklisting you.
So mad. You will be blacklisted.
And we'll tell all the other weightlifting companies to blacklist you as well.
So just, if you are going, doesn't matter what quality mat least you are, what you're doing, if you want to get a training camp with some snatches and clean and jerks in, go for it. Just make sure you have the time booked off for work, and we'll see you there. But enjoy. We'll see you next week.